I'm the nutritionist and I am going to have another crack at this. I just recorded a 15-minute video all about food chaining and how to handle apples with children, to find that my phone decided to fill up with storage space and decided not to actually keep that video even though I thought it was rolling the whole time. So let's go again. So what I have done is I have given you a list of 14 different ways to present an apple. Why would we do that? Okay, so if your child has recently gained apple into their dietary repertoire, or we are working on apple, or apple may be one of the last remaining fruits and veggies in your child's repertoire, it's really important that we start to look at diversifying how we present the apple. So why we do this is because each iteration of even the same food is still classed as a new food for children. So I'm going to work through all of these different ways of presenting apples for them so that our primary objective is to not burn out on them. So when we are stuck in the rut of always having apple, that's what we call a food jag. So JAG is how you spell food jag. Now a food jag is only problematic if we get to the point of burning out on them. So if you think back through your child's eating history, if you feel that they had a lot of exposure to a similar food and then all of a sudden it was gone, that's an example of burnout. Now, burnout becomes problematic if within 2 to 3 weeks they do not pick that food back up again into their dietary repertoire. That's one of the red flags for problematic feeding. Okay, so all is not lost though. What we want to do to prevent burnout and food jag, if we've got this in the repertoire, is to make sure that we present apple in a different way, even if we do have to present it every day, a different way every 48 hours. So that within that 48-hour period, we're not having it in exactly the same format. So that applies to all foods. Now I'm going to pass you over to my trusty olive oil bottle, which is standing in as my tripod today. So I've got a range of different apples here. As I said, I have just run through this and I went through loads of my apples and I'm now left with a quarter of an apple, a half apple and a full apple. So I'm hoping I can still run through all 14 ways of doing this with you. So my first way of presenting it is obviously whole apple. Okay, great. Next one, quartered apple or an apple. Apple cut into eighths. So what we want to do with that is obviously take the core out. Okay. Okay. And if we've got it in eighths here, you know, these make nice little wedges. It's also a great nifty little tool you can get at IKEA that just plonks down over the apple and breaks it into eighths already and takes out the core for you. Super easy. I've got one here. I just couldn't find it in time. Eighths. Now, what you might be wondering is if, as you can see, because I have already prepared this earlier, we're starting to get some of that browning reaction here. So it's called the Maillard reaction. And the Maillard reaction happens because we've got oxidization. So we get exposed to the air, effectively. Ways to stop the browning is, you may have heard of lemon juice. Lemon juice can impart a different flavor onto the apple. So if the children are new to apple, it's really hard to go and change taste straight away. So what we want to do is work through different presentations in this sort of order that I'm showing you, changing shape first. So to stop the browning reaction, obviously the easiest way is to present it fresh. Next, another way is to actually dunk it in pineapple juice. Pineapple juice is not as, doesn't impart as big a flavor as what lemon juice does. So you could try that with the kids, or try and just offer it when it's a fresh occasion as well. So then after that, we've got our slices as well. So something like if we are changing up how we're presenting it. Slices like this can be less intimidating for kids as well, especially if they're just getting used to the skin. It's nice and easy, and there's not as much oral motor load with a nice little slice as well. Slices are also handy as little vehicles for dips, learning about some wet texture foods. So I've got here some homemade sunflower seed butter, which is just sunflower seeds, some olive oil, some maple syrup and a pinch of salt in the food processor. And I could put some sunflower seed butter on and make a little sandwich. Great for added protein. Really good afternoon snack. The other options would be peanut butter, cream cheese, jam, whatever they might already have as a tolerated spread. They might like to have in apple slice like that as well. So this changes up the presentation, so for them to see this would be a very new food compared to this. Okay. Once we've got our diced apple is next. So that's pretty simple there. Remembering that you can have this peeled or unpeeled. And the next type of apple I've got on my list here is a candy striping. So the reason I like candy striping apples is especially if we've just lost some front teeth and we're finding our chew is a bit maladapted to the fact that, you know, there's gaps at the front. So I'm watching my oldest daughter at the moment really struggle with this sort of thing. She's struggling with biting. She's starting to put the food over onto her premolars to bite into rather than using her front teeth. So good element for candy striping, again, might be suffering from that Maillard reaction, but we can bite into it much easier if we've got the softer flesh to bite into, but we still get the goodness of learning about the skin. So that's another presentation you can do. Next would be some dried apple, which you can buy in the packets at the supermarket, or the dehydrated apple chips, which you'll find in the same sort of section of the supermarket, usually up on the top shelf. They're really light, really dehydrated, actually quite super sweet, so a bit of a different taste as well. Then maybe some stewed chunks of apple with cinnamon. So this again, I'd probably look at doing them peeled first before we do it with the skin on. I know that most of the fibre is in the skin, but when we're learning about this, what the skin does is adds two textures. So this is technically a mixed texture food, having the skin and the flesh. If we peeled it and stewed it that way, what you could do is have a sprinkle of cinnamon in a little bit of water, and it could become sort of, let me show you, peeled like that. As it gets microwaved or boiled in some water with that cinnamon, imparts that nice cinnamon aroma. If they're really interested in the smells or quite olfactory, have that interest in olfactory input, it would get softer and softer the longer you had it in there. So you can actually control that level of crunch that the apple would have. So you could just lightly blanch it for maybe 30 seconds to a minute, or you could start to really stew it down to be really fully poached and very, very soft. But what you can do with this is control that food change, because changing texture is probably one of the harder things to do when it comes to chaining in your food. Other changes in texture come next with maybe grated apple, it makes it really wet, or apple puree, or baked into something. So what I actually have here is all the ingredients, or most of them. Let me get one more. For a really simple apple fruit slice, so it's just equivalent to a cup of yogurt. It's pretty much all my yogurt now that I'm doing this twice. A cup of flour, just going sort of 1-for-1 with ratio. A cup of desiccated coconut and then my baking powder to make sure it rises. I just don't have enough coconut today, so I'm just going to put a little bit of extra flour in today. And then what I do is I'd probably put in half a cup of dried fruit and about half a cup worth of grated apple, or a full cup of grated apple into it. This is where the sweetness comes from. If your kids particularly like sweet foods, you might want to add in a little bit of caster sugar too. And I also would, you could add some flaked almonds to the top of the slice to bake, so that you've got a bit more of a sort of cakey thing, and the almonds add a little bit more nutrients as well. If you don't like any of those foods, they're really easily substituted. Yogurt could be substituted for coconut yogurt or soy yogurt. You can use gluten-free flours. You can use almond meal instead of the coconut. So there's lots of different things you can do with this sort of recipe, and I pretty much would go with 1 cup of any wet fruit to be added to it, or half a cup of any dried fruit could be added to the slice as well. It's a really versatile recipe. So yeah, my last option is to bake it into something and maybe involve them in the baking so that they can see their apple transform into something else. Okay? Yeah, so I'm hoping that that's a really handy video for you, all about thinking a little bit outside the box in terms of how we can present a food that our children have in their dietary repertoire now, and what we can do with it without sort of leading towards that burnout phase that makes it really hard for them to bring a food that they burn out on back into their diet, and more likely to bring in more similar foods to the other side of a currently accepted food than to try and bring back something that they burnt out on in the past. Okay? Thanks for listening. Bye.